Well, I've already said welcome on this Happy New Year's Day. Titled the sermon, One Day at a Time. And what a heck of a way to live. One day at a time. In fact, there's a beautiful, beautiful song. And I've tried to find it. My friend Bill Emery tried to help me find it the other day. One day at a time. One day at a time, dear Jesus. What a way to live. Well, I suspect it's 10 after 11 now. So most of you have all made your New Year's resolutions. And a few of you haven't even broken all of them yet. And the theme for today's service, in addition to being one day at a time, could just as easily have been, today is the first day of the rest of your life. Velma Daniels wrote a book that she titled Celebrate Joy. And she tells of an interesting situation where a man had made a trip up into northern Alaska to visit some of the people who lived above the Arctic Circle. And the man in the book says, never ask an Eskimo how old he is. Because he said, if you do, the Eskimo will just simply look at you and say, I don't know, and I don't care. And the man said he really doesn't know, and he really doesn't care. And he said another Eskimo had given him that same response sometime before, and he'd pressed him for a better response. And all the Eskimo would say when he said, how are you, or anything about how old you are, he'd just simply say, almost, that's all. Almost, that's all. The man didn't have a clue what this Eskimo meant when he would say, almost, that's all. So he talked to another guy who had been up in that country for over 20 years, and he was a newspaper man, and he had written a book on how the Eskimos live. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, the Eskimos believe that when they go to sleep at night, they literally die. They are literally dead to the world. Then when they wake up in the morning, they've been resurrected, and they're living a whole new life. Therefore, no Eskimo is older than one day. So that's what the Eskimo means. Almost, not yet, because the day isn't over yet. Well, life above the Arctic Circle is cruel, and mere survival becomes a real accomplishment. But you never see an Eskimo who is worried or anxious. They have learned to face life one day at a time. Have you learned to put all your anxieties and all your fears aside and to live one day at a time? That gives new meaning to that admonition that I started off with, where I said, today is the first day of the rest of your life. Our scripture lesson today deals with people who also are living in a harsh, cruel world. this lesson is the concluding part of the Christmas story. And the shepherds and the wise men gone, and the angel appears to Joseph in this dream, and he says to him, Herod is looking out after trying to find this child, and he wants to kill him. So get up, take the child, and escape to Egypt, and stay there until I tell you that it's safe to live. It is a scene that portrays darkness and dread and fear and flight. And this humble couple gathers together what few small possessions that they have, along with that precious babe, and they go in the darkness of the night, and they slip away, hoping to find safety in Egypt. Well, life is often like that. Even the most beautiful story in all of literature, this story of the gift of God's Son being delivered to humankind in a manger in Bethlehem. In that story, as beautiful it is, there is the specter of fear and even death. And this is an acknowledgement that on the first Sunday of the new year, that there is indeed often much to dread and to fear. And the Bible doesn't gloss over for us any of the real problems that we face as individuals trying to live in an imperfect world. From the very first family, with its envy and strife, through the daily battles of God's own people, as shown in the Bible, the people of Israel fighting neighbors, tribes, with feast, with famine, slavery, and wandering through the wilderness, through fear and tribulations. We see in all of their trials, life is really not easy. The Bible portrays no Pollyanna view of life. God did not promise us a rose garden. There is indeed much in life that we can dread. So Joseph and Mary fled to Egypt. But the story doesn't end there. Even when Herod dies and they feel like they're safe to return to Israel, they really can't return to their former home. And they can't do that and go to the province of Judea because Herod's son is there waiting for them. He's succeeded Herod, Archelaus has. And so that gives them much to fear. Then they settle in that little province of Galilee, in a little town called Nazareth. And the biblical testimony is realistic in that there is still much in life to fear. You see, the problem is with fear, when we allow that fear to overwhelm us. And fear can do amazing things to the human mind. The most basic of all human emotions is fear. And yet fear, in some areas, can be healthy. But many people are almost totally dominated by their fears. They fear of failure, fear of ridicule, fear of rejection, maybe fear of place, fear of people. There are as many fears as there are demands upon the human creatures. Anything we are asked to do or that we can do can create fear. We sit here Sunday morning. We know that we all have fear at one time or another. Everyone is afraid of something. And we all have that capacity to make our lives miserable by giving in to our fears. But there's an antidote to fear, and you can find it in the Scripture. It is an antidote that allowed the heroes of the Bible to dissolve their fears, and many of them to fight great battles. And the antidote is more than simply being courageous. Courage, yeah, that's an admirable quality. It allows us to face our fears for a time, and we're able to do battle. And I have a little graphic at home on a board, and it says, courage is being scared to death and saddling up anyway. Having said that, we need to realize that courage is really a limited ally. It may not last as long as we'd like for it to do. It all too easily can fall prey to its greatest emotion, its greatest enemy. And that's an emotion that has an interesting name. It's an emotion called discouragement. Think about it. Courage and discourage. For courage to be lasting and to be effective, it must be able to see hope. If it doesn't see hope, it quickly transforms into discouragement. The opposite of fear is not courage, my friends. The opposite of fear is faith. Faith tells us that even though the odds are really stacked against us, we are not alone. The biblical answer to fear is faith. We may see no hope as people of faith, but we know that there is one who is the source of all hope. And that is what we call faith. Not faith in ourselves, but faith in God. And that kind of faith can always defeat fear. It's interesting that Mary and Joseph, as they fled to Egypt, couldn't know that they were fulfilling an Old Testament prophecy. I called my people out of Egypt. And then as they headed from Egypt towards Nazareth, they were separating themselves from their friends and their families in Judea. They probably were not even aware that according to a prophecy of the Old Testament, which had written centuries before that the Messiah would be called a Nazarene. And even as the drama of that first Christmas begins, with them making their way to Joseph's hometown in Bethlehem, and that's because of a ruling by Augustus Caesar that all the world should be taxed. And they couldn't know that centuries before there was that prophecy that said that the babe would have to be born in Bethlehem. Think of it. God removed a Roman emperor in order to fulfill an isolated piece of Scripture, a little piece of Scripture. And God even used the rage of Herod and Archelaus to fulfill his purposes. Do you see the majesty and the glory of all of that? Even in the darkest of times, God was there. Just as God is there in your difficult times and mine. Life was hard for Mary and Joseph, but they were not alone. God was with them. And that is the meaning of faith. Not that our way is going to be made easy for us, but that God will still be with us. So, why are we afraid? Why do we become dispirited? Why do we become downcast? You see, God is at work always, every day. Because of Him, all things are working for the good for all who believe in Him and trust in Him. The same loving Father, the same loving Father who guided Mary and Joseph so gently towards Bethlehem, then towards Egypt, and then back to Nazareth, watches over your life and my life. He can free all of us from all of our fears if we trust Him to do it. If we just say, God, it's your deal. There's a parable about truths, and it's found of all places about a story, a true story of way of life in the jungles of Thailand. Once a wild elephant is made captive. Hunters tie an end of a chain around the elephant's foot. And it's a long chain, and they tie the other end to a very strong tree, a banyan tree. And the great elephant will tug and it'll pull with all of its strength. And it can't free itself. And the elephant will work for days and sometimes weeks, pulling and pulling, and it can't weaken that banyan tree. And then finally the elephant surrenders. And when the elephant surrenders, they can take a little iron tent-like peg and attach the chain to that and drive the peg in the ground, that the elephant could easily pull out. But it will never try, because it associates the struggle with the chain. It never realizes how easily it could have its own freedom. We need to realize how easily we can have our freedom Without faith, we are in bondage to our own worries, to our own anxieties. But with trust in God, we can indeed be set free. For the Eskimo, each day is a new life. For you and I, Christ can give us new life as well. And today is the first day of the rest of that life. Amen.